podcast focused on trends shaping the future of manufacturing. I'm Alexandria Bjork, your host, here with A.W. Schultz, two thought leaders with a passion for people and manufacturing. Today and every episode, we are diving deep into the advancements, sustainable practices, and dynamic changes transforming how we produce everything.
And now welcome Alexandria Bjork and A.W. Schultz.
Well, hello, Alexandria. How are you today?
Hey, AW, happy to be here with you. Another great episode on the books here. I'm excited to get into it. This will be an interesting one.
Absolutely. So we've been talking a lot about the environment, and it's no surprise that when we think about factors of the future that they have an impact on it. And you remember me, when we first met, I was talking about industrial, 5.0.
Yeah.
And 5.0 is not the revolution, but the evolution of industrial progression over the course of the last 200 plus years. And 5.0 is a transcendent of 4.0. A 4.0 is taking all that big data, that technology, the sensors, and having it all out there. But in 2021, the European Commission determined that there was needed to be more effort on driving out CO2 emissions specifically into the environment. And one of the things that they had done was based on the Paris Accord in 2018, they had made an agreement with a lot of the nations to a commitment to be net zero by 2050. And one of the things that the European Commission determined that they would need more than just having that technology out there. Okay. And they determined that it would be based on three things. One, the resiliencies that they have currently from Industrial 4.0, the tech that's out there, all that new sensors, artificial intelligence, all that good new fun stuff. But to maintain sustainability, so driving out that CO2, they need the third thing. And that third thing was that human-centric approach. Now, in a lot of our episodes, we're talking about the people issues that we go through because it has a large impact on how business gets done. Because you can't have sustainability if you don't have a culture of people that are bought into it.
Yeah.
But today, we were talking a little bit about the environment and some things that can be misleading and things that, we're just trying to solve ourselves. The question is like, how bad is it? And why are we being scared into some of these things?
Yeah.
I don't think anybody's really arguing that there has been some changes over the last few years. And you alluded to that it was first, greenhouse gases first was identified quite a while ago, and that was actually new news to me. So
1800s. I was shocked in preparing for this. Yeah, I was shocked that this has been this first crossed our species kind of consciousness in literally the 1800s. They discovered that there were certain types of gases that could change the temperature, and there was a force at work trapping those gases in. And I feel like I thought it was a lot more recent that this topic came up. And I think that kind of is overlooked and not often talked about in today's current climate, in today's current conversations of how long we as a species have been aware of this as a scientific fact, and what do we do about it? And then I'm thinking from a global and a supply chain standpoint, as well as a consumer standpoint. So from my global supply chain background, I'm thinking, well, we've created this essential monster that requires that everything is sourced all over the place. So what would it take to source manufacturing goods locally? Because as a consumer, everyone says buy local. I mean, there's countless studies on, the food that you get in the grocery store, because it's taken 15 days to get there, actually has zero nutrients, and you're just eating something that's basically empty, looks green, feels healthy, and mentally you're probably saying, oh, this is healthy, and then maybe you're getting benefits from that. But so buying locally from a nutritional standpoint is obviously scientifically the right thing to do. But how do you do that from a supply chain standpoint? You know, what do we do? You know, how do we stop, you know, shipping things across to then get them back to then ship them out? I feel like there's a lot of intercontinental shipments taking place. And while it might be unpopular to bring that up, I think that that's a huge part of this conversation, these CO2 emissions. You know, people are worried about driving gas vehicles, but no one's talking about importing our raw materials from, you know, China, or shipping chickens to China to be processed, to be returned, to be sold in our grocery stores. Like, to me, there's a lot of that going on that I don't have a clear line on, but I think that those conversations are missing in my point of view. Like, if people actually cared, then we would actually be having those conversations. And I wonder how Industry 5.0 might be able to solve that.
Well, one of the things that it's I know I remember saying evolution. I mean, it's something down the pipeline, is the talk about circular economics. So the idea is versus taking things from the raw materials, we do more efforts to recycle those materials and bring them forward. And from a global standpoint, it's hard to imagine coming down the pipeline in the next few years that we're going to have this figured out.
Yeah.
And, you know, I was curious, like when you were talking about the identifying CO2 gases in the air, where these individuals, what were they seeing as gases of? People just, you know, fires or forest fires, or, you know, cows?
Yeah. I gotta look. So I have it pulled up, thankfully, because it's kind of new to me. But what it looks like, or what I was able to look up, is that they discovered that our Earth's atmosphere in the 1800s was discovered. And it was discovered by Jean-Baptiste Fourier and John Tyndall. So they discovered that basically our atmosphere, made up of multiple gases, could trap heat. And this then is when the greenhouse effect came into play. So the impact that these two scientists bring to the table kind of together at this interesting time in history was that one of them, Fourier, he realized that our atmosphere was an insulator and was acting as this like kind of trap for the heat that was coming in, while Tyndall identified which gases were responsible for trapping the heat. So kind of like very nice yin and yang to come up with this overall concept of our atmosphere, and then the concept of trapping heat as a greenhouse effect. So that to me is interesting. I had no idea it was this far back in our history as a species. I would have thought that this was maybe best case scenario, early 1900s. I mean, we think about, when did electricity come into play? Like early 1900s. So like the fact that they knew that greenhouse gases were a thing, or there was a greenhouse effect in the 1800s, is just mind-boggling to me in and of itself. And then it kind of goes through some history about like, then there were these predictions that burning fossil fuels, and this came in like the 1900s, or no, late 1800s, like 1890s, that burning certain types of fossil fuels would raise global temperatures. And then what I find interesting is that as time goes on, our species collectively didn't stop and say, let's change now before it gets to a certain point. And I still feel like we continue to go down that road as I think about global supply chain stuff. And even when you think about from a consumer standpoint, like what are we doing that's actually helping this problem? Because yes, I believe that small actions have big outcomes. So like if every single person did one thing right by the climate change, then I do believe that would have an exponentially big effect on the outcomes. But at the same time, if we're over here as individuals and consumers doing these small little tiny acts, but the biggest corporations and the people who are just like having the biggest, or groups that have the biggest kind of impact on this scenario, aren't making the same changes and efforts, then are we just counterbalancing each other? Are the consumers kind of making up for these corporate monopolies? I don't know. Like, have you thought about that? Like, I just can't. Yeah.
Yeah, there's some studies out there, and they're not they're by countries really. And if you see, like, China is a large producer, but they are also a humongous country. But if you look at some of the countries that in Europe and some in Asia, they've seen a reduction versus ratios that they've actually reduced some of their CO2 gases by. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but
Yeah.
it was interesting. And the U.S. has also had some reductions versus what their baseline was. We're saying, like, I'm not sure what they determined what the baseline was. I don't want to say without being precise, but there has been reductions on it.
Well, that's good.
But the other thing that I found interesting, and maybe you've never heard of this, but the planet Venus is surrounded by clouds, and there's some theories that at one point it might have been inhabited, but since a lot of the CO2 gases are in the air, it's heated up the planet so much it's inhabitable at this point.
Wow.
And that's something I just learned over the last year or so. But there's a theory based on that.
That's cool. I hope that's not our future. I hope that's not our future.
Well, they're using it as a sample of what could become.
Yeah.
But the other thing we wanted to talk about was, you talk about this corporate responsibility. There's also a term called greenwashing.
Yeah.
And greenwashing is when you're making false or misleading claims that you're more environmentally conscious than you actually are.
Yeah.
And for me, it's not a new topic, but it's something that I'd be interested to find out how do you who's been pegged on this list of greenwashers.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's some people that follow the ESG, the environmental, social, and governance groups that pull a lot of this information together. But some of the examples of what greenwashing is, for those viewers that may not know, is one is making vague or misleading claims, because it's very hard to sometimes I want to quantify it. Some of the they lack of proof, but they're claiming it.
Yeah.
False certifications. There is, from what I understand, there isn't an overall arching governance on ESG, at least from research I've done in the last year.
Okay.
They also do rebranding. So, selling something.
Oh, yeah. Or just like putting stuff in green packaging. Like, we are like suckers for just having green and being like, oh, it's so good, or put a leaf on it and it's better all of a sudden. While you were talking about greenwashing, I thought, okay, so I asked ChatGPT to tell me who are the biggest greenwashing offenders. And now seeing the first one on the list, I do actually remember this, but it's funny because the way our media cycle works, things that happened today or even 3 months ago are quickly forgotten about because there's such surplus of scandals that we can quickly forget about scandals. So one of them was the Dieselgate scandal in 2015 with Volkswagen. So yeah, I know it's like everyone heard about this, but I completely forgot until we're just talking about it. So the company marketed its diesel cars as eco-friendly, low emissions, but yet they emitted up to 40 times more nitrogen oxide than allowed during normal driving conditions.
Wow.
Intense. And actually, I just met somebody recently who works in the luxury car sales industry, and he does not recommend Volkswagen. So no shade to Volkswagen, but the vibes don't seem to be right there for Volkswagens. Another one is BP. I'm going to guess it has to do with the oil spill, but
yeah.
Or no, actually different. It says it was long marketed as a leader in green energy, and it had this Beyond Petroleum campaign in the early 2000s where they were promoting investments in renewable energy. But then later, critics pointed out that BP continues to spend the vast majority of its capital on fossil fuels. And it's been criticized because it has relatively small green energy initiatives. And basically that's what they're saying there. And juicy, Nestle, like the food company. Yeah, it says they were making claims around sustainability and plastic use reduction, announcing various recycling initiatives and pledges to reduce plastic waste. However, they continue to be one of the largest producers of single-use plastic packaging, contributing significantly to global plastic pollution.
Yeah, so I do have to admit something. Company I used to work for, I guess you could probably look me up and find out who it was, but I'm not going to say it.
Yeah.
But at one point, when I was working in the plant, I was also tagged with wearing another hat. I was in charge of resource conservation. And we were a bottling plant. And every year, I would get an award for one of the most recycled companies in the city.
Wow.
For the amount of plastic bottles that we would recycle. And it's counterintuitive when you consider, like, no, we're recycling them because, it costs more to throw it away. And we're very wasteful. The stuff, if the bottle falls on the ground, we can't use it. So we just throw it away. So we were very inefficient on that part. But the fact that we were winning an award for it, I don't think it sends the right message.
That's really, that to me just perfectly describes these weird frames that I think these vague people or systems or structures in power create, right? Like, it's like, oh, you're doing such a great job because you're recycling the most. But to your brilliant point, no one's looking at why you're recycling the most is because you're creating the most plastic or waste of plastic. Yeah. So that's an interesting take. Okay. I have to say H&M is another one and Coca-Cola are another ones. So H&M promoted this conscious collection, claiming it uses environmentally friendly materials and processes. However, investigations have shown that the actual environmental benefits of collection are minimal. So this kind of goes to what we were talking about as we were preparing for this episode. Like, I really strongly question how helpful, how impactful these little things that the consumers are being asked or suggested that we're supposed to do to be socially conscious. What is the actual impact of that? And I want to know who would be studying that. These aren't questions necessarily to you. These are just questions out into the world and things I'm curious about. But I feel like these are the questions some of us should be asking as consumers and as, professionals, especially in the industrial manufacturing world.
I guess I think of it like this. It's think of us as children, right?
Yeah.
And I think of my children, and every day I'm telling them, wash your hands, throw it in the trash, and other things like that. So I think a lot of times we're setting the stage for us, maybe in the future, to just have those better habits.
Yeah.
I remember if you're driving down the road, this is just me, and someone throws out a cigarette butt, I think that is disgusting. Why would you do that? When I grew up in the 80s, that was common.
Yeah.
But I think my behavior has changed over the years on that.
Yeah.
And you don't see a lot of people just, open down the window and throwing out wrappers.
Yeah, you're right. And, it's something I've become critically aware of. So in moving around to different parts of Chicago, moving out of Chicago into like neighboring suburbs that butt up against the city, and then moving from Chicago and or city life up into Wisconsin, which is complete 360, not even 180 difference, and then experiencing Milwaukee and stuff like that. One of the things that I've been reflecting about is like clutter and trash and things like that. So it's interesting you bring up, throwing cigarette butts out. And I'm an ex-smoker, and I'll admit, like, I would never consider myself a litter bug, but I thought nothing of throwing my cigarette butts out the window up until literally 2022 when I smoked. Like I did, like, self-admittedly wrong. But you're right. And, I guess that's a really good point about how we are making progress. Like, when you zoom out, you can actually see the progress and the changes. So like you're zooming out, and I'm very like narrowly focused in some of these thoughts and some of these things that we're talking about here. So I guess if I'm going to take away anything from this episode, or if there's anything I hope the listeners take away, is number one, I guess, research the companies that you're buying from and be conscientious about whose gas you're putting in your car, because those are things that you can directly influence. If we're all not buying BP gas because they're falsely advertising that they're doing things that are good and they're not, we can have an impact there. I strongly stand by that. This H&M concept, I used to wear their jeans exclusively until they abolished the type of jeans I wore. And I mean, this kind of idea is kind of turning me off about the concept of even considering going back to shop there. I buy shampoo that's not in plastic containers. It's shampoo bars. All of my bars of soap don't come in plastic wrap. Those are things you can do. My friend, if she were hearing this, she'd be like, "You're being so crunchy right now," which I just learned what that is. Do you know what crunchy is?
No.
Oh, okay. So
I think
crunchy,
I understand the way you're saying it, but
yeah, crunchy is like you're like really like conscientious of like your impact on the world. So like buying the products that don't have the chemicals in them and don't have the excess packaging and all that stuff. That's, I guess, being crunchy. But yeah, choose what gas you put in your car. Not going to get into EVs versus gasoline cars. That's a whole different topic, but you can make those consumer choices. I think we can all find slight 1% improvements in the products that we buy. If we do start buying our vegetables more locally, like shamefully, that's got to be a 2025 initiative for me, because I am surrounded by farms here. A lot of the farms that are at the Chicago farmers markets are all surrounding me here. So I don't know why I'm having such a difficulty of shopping locally. I guess convenience and kind of creativity might factor into that, but I think that's something I could do better. Is there anything that, like, after we're talking about this, you think you could do differently, or maybe somebody in the audience might be able to take out of this? So that way, maybe even if it is or isn't impactful, at least we feel better about it.
I wish I'd done one research. The most waste energy consumption piece of equipment there is that's out there?
What?
A leaf blower.
No.
Yeah.
How do you know this, and tell me why?
I'd have to pull it in the book I had. It was on. It just came out last year. It's from. I can't remember the name. But it was an energy conscious facts on it. I probably should have had this for our podcast here this morning, but that wasn't one of the things. But if you're using electric, it kind of contradicts that, but it's still pulling power. But
so electric is better than gas? Is that what we need to take away from this? Electric is better than gas, but ultimately get your rake if you want to be the best?
Yeah. I mean,
so
I got too big of trees. I'm not getting a rake.
I literally almost lit my whole neighborhood on fire. I had leaves stacked up as high as me in a 10-foot circle, and I lit that stuff on fire last year. And I was like, okay, I can't do that this year. So my fire pit got expanded, but I do have an electric leaf blower. So at least that makes me feel less bad, I guess, in this.
I have a gas.
Okay. Well, we can all.
I found out after.
Okay, we could consider that in our future purchases of how we buy our. That actually makes me interested to think about the future of like small appliances, like drills or lithium ion batteries, right? Like we have electric versus gas leaf blowers. I wonder if there's ever going to get to a point where like we have like a solar powered charging station for like our drills and our saws and our flashlights and our leaf blowers, where it's like that could be a really cool innovation where it's just a solar powered charging base.
No, that's being talked about. So that conference that we were at, I was in lunch with an individual, and it was from Sweden, and they were talking. Well, he was talking about how energy inefficient a lot of our appliances are.
Yeah.
And they could have an impact on it and some of the work that they're doing on it. But
that's cool.
It was over my head, and I was just. Yeah, I could tell you that some of these appliances are very inefficient.
That's cool.
All right. So
All right. I think that's it for today before we run down any other rabbit holes here.
You're going out too.
All right. Are we clocking out?
We are clocking out like finished goods.
All
Take
right.
care,
We're
everyone.
out of here.
This is Factory of the Future, and we are out of here like finished goods. Stay tuned for our next episode of Factory of the Future, where we're exploring groundbreaking techniques and behaviors that are reshaping industrial landscapes. Don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review and help others discover the cutting-edge insights transforming manufacturing as we know it.